The screech of tires cut through the morning air as Sarah Miller slammed on her brakes. Her coffee splashed across the dashboard, and her heart pounded against her ribs. Just 3 feet in front of her bumper stood a deer, frozen in fear, its wide eyes reflecting the headlights of her old Honda. For 5 long seconds, they stared at each other through the windshield, woman and animal, both startled by their near collision on this foggy country road. As quickly as it had appeared, the deer bounded into the woods, leaving Sarah breathless and shaken. She glanced at the clock. 6:42 a.m. She was already running late, and now coffee dripped from her dashboard onto her only clean work shirt. "Great. Just great," she muttered, reaching for napkins from the glove compartment. This was the last thing she needed today of all days. Get ready. You think you know where this story is going, but trust me, you don't. Let us know where you're listening from in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Sarah pulled over to the shoulder of the road and tried to blot the worst of the coffee stains. As she dabbed at her blouse, her phone rang. The name Little Sprouts Daycare flashed across the screen. Her stomach dropped. "Hello?" she answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Ms. Miller? This is Janet from Little Sprouts. I'm afraid we've had a pipe burst overnight. The entire center is flooded. We'll be closed for at least a week while repairs are made." Sarah closed her eyes and leaned her forehead against the steering wheel. "A week? Are you sure?" "I'm sorry for the inconvenience. I'm calling all parents now." "But I have to be at work in an hour," Sarah said, her voice rising. "Today's presentation is mandatory. My whole department will be there. I can't miss it." "I understand, but there's simply nothing we can do. The building isn't safe." After hanging up, Sarah sat motionless, staring through the windshield at the fog-shrouded road. 6 months at Palmer Technologies, and today was her chance to finally present her efficiency proposal to upper management. Missing it wasn't an option. Not if she wanted to keep her job. Not if she wanted to make rent this month. She scrolled through her contacts, calling everyone she could think of. Her neighbor, Mrs. Carson, no answer. Her cousin Jen, out of town. Even her ex-mother-in-law, straight to voicemail. No one could watch 8-year-old Ethan on such short notice. Sarah pressed her palms against her eyes, fighting back tears of frustration. Then she made the only decision she could. She turned the car around and drove back to her small rental house where Ethan was still sleeping. "Buddy, wake up," she said gently, sitting on the edge of his bed. "There's been a change of plans today." Ethan rubbed his eyes, his brown hair sticking up in all directions. "What's wrong, Mom?" "Daycare is closed. There's been a flood." "Cool. Do I get to stay home?" His face brightened. Sarah took a deep breath. "Not exactly. You need to come with me to work today." "Really? To the big building with the robots?" "Yes, but listen carefully." She held his shoulders, making sure he was fully awake. "This is very important, Ethan. My company doesn't allow kids at work. If anyone finds out you're there, I could lose my job. Do you understand?" He nodded solemnly, but his eyes sparkled with excitement. "It'll be like a spy mission. Operation Secret Kid." Despite her anxiety, Sarah smiled. "That's right. But spies have to be completely silent and invisible." While Ethan dressed, Sarah called her supervisor, Linda, with a carefully crafted half-truth about running late due to a childcare emergency that she was handling. Not technically a lie. 40 minutes later, they pulled into the Palmer Technologies employee parking garage. The gleaming 12-story building loomed before them, its glass exterior reflecting the morning sun that had finally burned through the fog. "Remember the plan?" Sarah asked, straightening Ethan's collar. "Stay in the storage room. Be super quiet. Don't touch anything. If anyone comes, hide behind the big metal cabinets. And what do you do if you need me?" He held up the small walkie-talkie she dug out of his toy box. "Press the button once. Don't talk. You'll come as soon as you can." Sarah nodded and squeezed his hand. "Just for today, I promise." They entered through a side door, Sarah tensely nodding at the security guard while keeping Ethan partially hidden behind her. They hurried down a service corridor to the large supply room on the first floor where Sarah sometimes ate lunch alone. It was seldom used except by maintenance staff. "It's not so bad," she said, clearing a space among boxes of printer paper and cleaning supplies. She spread her jacket on the floor and set up Ethan's tablet, a few books, and the lunch she'd hastily packed. "I'll come check on you between meetings." "When's your big presentation?" he asked. "At 11. That's the most important part of my day." "You'll do great, Mom." He gave her a thumbs up. "I'll be cheering for you in my head." Sarah felt a lump in her throat as she hugged him. "I love you more than anything, you know that?" "I know. Now go be awesome." She slipped out and hurried to her desk, checking her watch. 8:27 a.m. She'd made it just in time for the morning team meeting. The hours crawled by. Sarah's attention was split between her work and worry about Ethan. She checked on him twice, finding him contentedly reading or playing quiet games on his tablet. But as 11 o'clock approached, her anxiety mounted. The presentation would last at least 45 minutes, and she couldn't leave in the middle to check on him. "You've got this," she whispered to herself, organizing her presentation notes one last time before heading to the conference room. The room was already filling with department heads and executives when Sarah arrived. She took her place near the front, setting up her materials with trembling hands. "Miller, I hear this proposal of yours might save us substantial operating costs," said James Palmer himself, the CEO taking a seat at the head of the table. "Yes, sir," Sarah said, her mouth suddenly dry. "If implemented correctly, my projections show a 17% reduction in production waste." As more executives filed in, Sarah pushed all thoughts of Ethan from her mind. This was her moment. Everything she'd worked for these past 6 months. She couldn't afford to be distracted. The presentation began smoothly. Sarah walked through her efficiency models, highlighting problem areas in the current system and demonstrating her solutions. The room was engaged, executives leaning forward, asking thoughtful questions. Even CEO Palmer was nodding appreciatively. Then came a commotion from the hallway. Sarah faltered mid-sentence as she heard a familiar voice, Ethan's voice, followed by deeper voices and hurried footsteps. Her heart stopped. The conference room door burst open. There stood Ethan, eyes wide with excitement, an ID badge that wasn't his dangling from his neck. Behind him was Marcus Reynolds, the head of security, looking both confused and stern. "Mom," Ethan exclaimed. "I found it! I found the robot lab!" Complete silence fell over the conference room. Every executive turned to stare at Sarah. "I'm sorry," she stammered. "I can explain." "Ms. Miller," James Palmer said slowly, "does this young man belong to you?" Before she could answer, Ethan rushed forward. "You must be Mr. Palmer. Mom has your picture on our fridge, from the company newsletter. She says you're a genius and that your robot factory is going to change everything." Palmer raised an eyebrow, looking from the boy to Sarah. "I apologize, sir," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "My daycare had an emergency closure this morning. I had no alternatives. I know it's against company policy." "Where have you been keeping him?" Palmer asked. "In the supply room on the first floor. He was supposed to stay there." She shot Ethan a look. "I got bored," Ethan explained matter-of-factly, "and hungry. I was looking for the vending machines, but then I saw the sign for the robotics lab and I had to see it. The security man caught me using Mom's ID badge to try to get in." Sarah closed her eyes briefly. Her career was over. She'd be fired on the spot. To her surprise, Palmer laughed. "Ambitious kid. How old are you, son?" 8, sir, and a half." "And what do you know about robotics?" Ethan's face lit up. "I read all about them. I'm building one at home from a kit Mom got me. It's supposed to sort recycling, but I'm having trouble with the sensor calibration." Palmer looked genuinely interested. "Sensor calibration can be tricky. What kind of sensors are you using?" As Ethan launched into a detailed explanation, Sarah stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene. The executives around the table exchanged bemused glances. Some smiled. Others frowned disapprovingly. Finally, Palmer held up his hand. "Tell you what, young man. Why don't you take a seat over there while your mother finishes her presentation? Then maybe, just maybe, we can arrange a proper tour of the robotics lab." "Really?" Ethan gasped. "James," the VP of Operations cut in, "company policy clearly states—" "I'm well aware of the policy, Helen," Palmer replied. "I wrote it. I'm also aware that sometimes circumstances require flexibility." He turned to Sarah. "I assume this is not a regular occurrence, Ms. Miller?" "No, sir. Absolutely not." "Then please continue. I believe you were telling us about the projected savings in the assembly process?" Sarah blinked, momentarily speechless. Then she gathered her wits and resumed her presentation, acutely aware of Ethan sitting quietly in the corner, watching her with pride. She had no idea what would happen after this presentation ended, whether she'd still have a job, how she'd handle the next week of daycare closure, what the other executives thought of her now. But for this moment, all she could do was continue, one slide at a time, while her worlds collided in this glass-walled conference room on the 10th floor. James Palmer remained in the conference room after the other executives filed out. Sarah stood awkwardly by the podium, unsure what to do. Ethan swung his legs back and forth in the oversized office chair, playing with a paper clip he'd found on the table. "Ms. Miller," Palmer said, wheeling his chair closer to her. Sarah hadn't paid much attention before, but now she noticed the sleek modern wheelchair he used. It wasn't like the standard hospital-issue wheelchairs she was used to seeing. This one looked custom-built, with various controls and a subtle blue light glowing from somewhere underneath. "Sir, I want to apologize again for—" Palmer waved her apology away. "Your presentation was excellent. 17% reduction in waste is significant. I'd like to implement your suggestions starting next month." Sarah blinked. "Really? I mean, thank you, sir." "I should be thanking you. Too many of our mid-level managers just maintain the status quo. You've shown initiative." Ethan piped up from across the room. "Mom stays up really late working on her ideas. Sometimes I find her asleep at the kitchen table with all her papers." Sarah felt her cheeks grow warm, but Palmer just smiled. "Hard work often goes unnoticed, young man. That's why I'm glad you brought it to my attention today." Sarah couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. Not only was she not being fired, but Palmer was complimenting her work. "The robotics lab," Palmer continued, turning to Ethan. "I did promise you a tour, didn't I?" Ethan's eyes widened. "Yes, sir." "Then let's not waste any more time." Palmer moved his wheelchair toward the door, gesturing for them to follow. As they walked through the hallways, Sarah noticed how people quickly stepped aside for Palmer, nodding respectfully or offering quick hellos. He acknowledged them with brief nods, but didn't slow down. "How long have you been with Palmer Technologies, Ms. Miller?" he asked as they waited for the elevator. 6 months, sir, in the operations department." "And before that?" "I was at Meridian Manufacturing for 5 years until they downsized." Palmer nodded thoughtfully. "You're raising your son alone?" The personal question caught Sarah off guard. "Yes, it's just the two of us." "That can't be easy." "We manage," Sarah said, then immediately wondered if that sounded ungrateful. "I mean, Palmer Technologies has been a good place to work. The hours are predictable and the benefits are helpful." The elevator arrived and they stepped inside. Palmer pressed the button for the 3rd floor. "The robotics lab is one of our most exciting divisions," Palmer explained as the elevator descended. "We're developing assistive technologies that help people with mobility issues maintain their independence." Ethan looked at Palmer's wheelchair with new understanding. "Did you make your own chair?" "Ethan!" Sarah hissed, mortified by her son's directness. But Palmer laughed. "Smart observation. Yes, this chair is one of our prototypes. I have a progressive muscular condition that makes walking difficult, so I get to test our new designs before they go to market." Ethan studied the chair with fascination. "It's really cool. Does it do special things? It responds to slight pressure changes, so I can control it with minimal effort. It can also climb stairs, though not very gracefully yet. The elevator doors opened onto a large, open space filled with workstations, testing areas, and glass-walled labs. Engineers in white coats or casual clothes moved between areas, some working on computer models, others assembling what looked like robotic limbs or testing mobility devices. Ethan gasped. "This is the coolest place ever!" Palmer smiled at his enthusiasm. "Dr. Chen," he called to a woman examining something under a microscope. "Would you mind showing our young visitor around? This is Ethan Miller, son of Sarah Miller from Operations. He has an interest in robotics." Dr. Chen, a middle-aged woman with short black hair and rectangular glasses, looked surprised but quickly composed herself. "Of course, Mr. Palmer. Happy to." As Dr. Chen led Ethan to a nearby workstation to show him a robotic hand they were developing, Palmer turned to Sarah. "Walk with me," he said, moving his chair toward a quieter corner of the lab. Sarah followed, her mind racing. Was this when he would tell her about the consequences for bringing Ethan to work? "Your efficiency proposal really is impressive," Palmer said when they were out of earshot of others. "But I'm equally impressed by your determination. Not many people would risk their job to fulfill both work and family responsibilities." "I didn't have much choice," Sarah admitted. "My parents live in Arizona, and I don't have other family nearby. When the daycare called this morning, you don't need to explain. I understand difficult situations." Sarah nodded, unsure what to say next. "I'm curious," Palmer continued. "In your research for the efficiency proposal, did you ever consider the challenges our employees face with work-life balance?" "Actually, yes. I found that production errors increased during periods when employees were dealing with family stress or childcare issues." Palmer looked thoughtful. "Interesting. Tell me, what would you think about Palmer Technologies offering on-site childcare?" Sarah stared at him. "On-site childcare? Here? We have the space. That empty section on the first floor used to be a training center before we moved those functions online. It's just sitting empty now." "That would be incredible," Sarah said, her mind racing with the possibilities. "It would reduce employee absences, late arrivals, and early departures. Parents wouldn't be stressed about rushing to daycare before it closes. And in emergencies like today." "Exactly," Palmer interrupted. "It's not just a nice perk. It's good business." Across the room, Ethan was beaming as Dr. Chen let him try on a robotic glove that mimicked his hand movements. "Look, Mom," he called. "I'm controlling a robot." Sarah smiled at her son's excitement, then turned back to Palmer. "May I ask why you're telling me this? Is it something the company is already considering?" "Not yet, but it will be, if you're willing to oversee the project." Sarah blinked. "Me? But I'm not in facilities or HR." "Your background at Meridian included logistics management, correct? And your efficiency proposal shows you understand systems integration. Plus," he gestured toward Ethan, "you clearly have personal insight into what working parents need. I'd need to learn a lot about childcare regulations, and we'd provide all the necessary resources and support staff. I'm not asking you to become a daycare provider. I'm asking you to manage the implementation of a new company initiative." Sarah's mind was spinning. Was this really happening? Would this be instead of my current position? It would be a promotion. Operations Manager for Employee Services, reporting directly to me, with a corresponding salary increase, of course. Sarah tried to keep her expression professional, but inside, her heart was racing. A promotion, a salary increase, and a solution to her childcare struggles, all in one conversation. "Why me?" she asked finally. "You barely know me." Palmer's expression grew more serious. "You know what happens when you live with a disability, Ms. Miller? People either ignore you completely or they only see the wheelchair. Very few see the person. Your son walked into that conference room and saw me. Not just the CEO, not just the wheelchair. He saw someone who might share his interest in robotics. He glanced over at Ethan, who was now watching intently as Dr. Chen demonstrated something on a computer screen. Sometimes we find what we need in unexpected places, Palmer continued. I needed someone with both the professional skills and personal motivation to make this project succeed. Today, that person walked right into my conference room, or rather, her son did. Sarah felt a lump forming in her throat. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Take the weekend to think about it if you need to, but I think you already know this is right. Before Sarah could respond, Ethan ran over, his eyes bright with excitement. Mom, Dr. Chen showed me the exoskeleton they're building. It helps people walk when their legs don't work right. And there's a robot arm that can be controlled by thinking. And they're making smart homes that can help people who can't move much. Palmer smiled at Ethan's enthusiasm. What do you think? Should we hire your mom to help us build something new here at Palmer Technologies? Yes, Ethan said without hesitation. Then he looked at Sarah. Wait, what would you be building? Sarah exchanged a look with Palmer. A place where kids can stay while their parents work, right here in the building. Ethan's eyes widened. Like a daycare? Here? Exactly, Palmer said. And we need someone smart to set it up and run it. Mom's super smart, Ethan said confidently. She fixes everything at our house, even the washing machine when it broke. Palmer raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Mechanical skills too. I'm even more convinced we've found the right person. Sarah couldn't help but laugh. It was just a clogged drain, not exactly robotics. Problem solving is problem solving, Palmer replied. So, do we have a deal? Sarah looked at her son, then back at Palmer. 6 months ago, she'd been desperately applying for jobs after being laid off. Today, she was being offered a promotion that would not only advance her career, but also solve one of her biggest daily challenges. Yes, she said, extending her hand. We have a deal. Palmer shook her hand firmly. Excellent. HR will have the paperwork ready Monday morning. In the meantime, he turned to Ethan. How would you like to see where we test the stair climbing function on wheelchairs like mine? Really, can I try it? The controls? I don't see why not. Under supervision, of course. As they followed Palmer across the lab, Sarah felt like she was floating. The disaster she had feared this morning had somehow transformed into an unbelievable opportunity. For the first time in years, she felt something beyond the daily struggle to keep everything together. She felt hope. Whatever challenges the new position would bring, she would face them. She had faced worse. And now, instead of just surviving, she might actually have a chance to thrive, and to create something that would help other working parents like herself. All because her son had wandered out of a supply closet and into the path of someone who saw potential where others might have seen only problems. Sometimes, Sarah thought as she watched Ethan chatting excitedly with Palmer, the worst days can take the most unexpected turns. Monday morning arrived with a sense of possibility that Sarah hadn't felt in years. She dressed carefully in her best navy blazer and dropped Ethan off at his friend Tyler's house. Tyler's mom had agreed to watch him until Little Sprouts reopened. Good luck on your first day at your new job, Mom, Ethan called as she left. It's the same company, just a different position, Sarah reminded him. But you get your own office now, right? With your name on the door and everything? Sarah smiled. I don't know about that yet, but I'll tell you all about it tonight. As she drove to Palmer Technologies, Sarah's mind raced with ideas and questions. How quickly could they convert the empty training space? What kind of staff would they need to hire? How many children would they accommodate? Despite her nervousness, she felt confident. This was a challenge she was ready for. When she arrived, Kate from HR was waiting for her in the lobby. Good morning, Ms. Miller. Mr. Palmer asked me to get you settled right away. Kate handed her a folder of paperwork and a new ID badge. This gives you access to all the areas you'll need for your new position. Sarah glanced at the badge. Under her name were the words, Operations Manager, Employee Services. Seeing it printed there made it feel real. Mr. Palmer also wanted me to show you to your new office before the meeting, Kate continued. My new office? Sarah repeated, thinking of Ethan's words. Kate led her to the elevator and pressed the button for the 8th floor, executive territory. Sarah had only been up there for meetings, never to work. Here we are, Kate said, stopping at a corner office with glass walls facing the hallway. Inside was a large desk, comfortable chairs, and a small conference table. And yes, there was her name on a plaque beside the door, Sarah Miller. This was Ms. Howard's office before she retired last month, Kate explained. Mr. Palmer thought you'd need the space for planning the new childcare center. Sarah stepped inside, running her hand along the smooth surface of the desk. It's bigger than my apartment's living room. Kate smiled. The meeting starts in 15 minutes in the main conference room. Mr. Palmer has assembled a team to help you with this project. After Kate left, Sarah took a moment to absorb her new surroundings. Just 3 days ago, she'd been working in a cubicle, worried about making rent. Now she had an office with a view of the city. Life could change so quickly. At exactly 9:00 a.m., Sarah walked into the conference room, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. 6 people were already seated, including Palmer. Ah, Sarah, Palmer said, using her first name for the first time. Let me introduce your team. He went around the table. Lisa from HR, who specialized in employee benefits. Marcus from security, whom Sarah recognized from Ethan's conference room adventure. Damon from facilities management. Teresa from legal. And Rachel, an early childhood education specialist Palmer had brought in as a consultant. Together, you'll design and implement what I hope will become a model for corporate childcare, Palmer explained. I've allocated a budget of $1.5 million for the initial setup and first year of operations. Sarah nearly choked on her water. She'd never managed a project with that kind of budget before. Our timeline is ambitious, Palmer continued. I'd like to open the center in 3 months. 3 months? Damon from facilities looked skeptical. The renovations alone will need to be expedited, Palmer finished for him. I've already spoken with the contractors. They can start next week if we have plans ready. The meeting continued for 2 hours as they discussed requirements, regulations, staffing needs, and logistics. Sarah took careful notes, asked questions, and began forming a mental picture of what they needed to do. One last thing, Palmer said as the meeting wound down. I'd like this project to be more than just a convenience for our employees. I want it to be exceptional. What did you have in mind? Sarah asked. I'm not sure yet. Something that makes use of our company's strengths in technology and innovation. He looked thoughtful. Think about it. We'll talk more later. Over the next few weeks, Sarah threw herself into the project. Her days became a blur of meetings, research, facility tours, and planning sessions. She visited other corporate childcare centers, interviewed potential staff, and worked with architects on the design. The empty training space was larger than she'd initially realized, almost 5,000 square feet. They could create separate areas for different age groups, a secure outdoor playground on an adjacent terrace, and even a special room for children with sensory needs. One evening, about 3 weeks into the project, Sarah was working late in her office when Palmer stopped by. How's it going? He asked, wheeling into the room. Sarah gestured to the blueprints spread across her desk. We're making progress. The contractors start demolition next week. And Ethan? How's he handling your longer hours? He's actually been coming here after school, Sarah admitted. He sits in my office and does his homework. I hope that's okay. Of course, Palmer smiled. In fact, I was hoping to talk to both of you. I had an idea about that something exceptional I mentioned. What kind of idea? Let me show you. Is Ethan here now? Sarah nodded. He's in the break room getting a snack. Perfect. Ask him to meet us in the robotics lab when he's done. 20 minutes later, Sarah and Ethan joined Palmer in the now familiar robotics lab. Dr. Chen was there too, along with 2 other engineers Sarah had met during previous visits. Ethan, Palmer began. "You're interested in robots, right?" "Yes, sir." Ethan nodded enthusiastically. "What if our daycare center had robots, special ones designed to help with educational activities?" Ethan's eyes widened. "Real robots? That would be amazing." "We've been developing a line of interactive robots for children's hospitals," Dr. Chen explained, bringing out what looked like a small, friendly robot with big eyes and rounded features. "They help children learn while they're receiving treatment. We could adapt them for the childcare center." Sarah watched as the robot lit up and greeted Ethan by name. "How did it know my name?" he asked, delighted. "Facial recognition," Dr. Chen said. "It can identify the children and personalize interactions. We could program them with educational games, stories, and activities," Palmer added. "And they could help the staff keep track of the children." Sarah considered the idea. "Would they be safe and practical for everyday use?" "We've designed them to be extremely durable and safe around children," one of the other engineers assured her. "The hospital versions have been very successful." "What do you think, Ethan?" Palmer asked. "Would other kids like this?" Ethan nodded vigorously. "They'd love it, but—" he hesitated. "But what?" Sarah encouraged. "What if some kids are scared of robots? Or what if they just want a real person to talk to sometimes?" The adults exchanged surprised glances. It was a thoughtful observation from an 8-year-old. "That's an excellent point," Palmer said. "The robots would be assistants, not replacements for human caregivers. Kids would always have people looking after them too. And we could design them to be non-threatening," Dr. Chen added. "More like friendly toys than machines." Ethan seemed satisfied with this answer. "Then I think it's a great idea." "Me too," Sarah agreed, impressed by both the concept and her son's insightful question. It would make our center unique and give the children exposure to technology in a positive way. Over the next several weeks, the project gained momentum. The construction proceeded on schedule, the robot prototypes were refined, and Sarah assembled a staff of qualified childcare providers excited about the innovative approach. Word spread throughout the company, and Sarah began receiving emails from employees with young children, all asking how soon they could enroll. The response was even stronger than she had anticipated. 6 weeks into the project, Sarah was reviewing furniture orders in her office when her phone rang. It was Palmer. "Sarah, I need you to come to my office right away," he said, his voice unusually serious. "Is something wrong?" she asked, instantly worried. "Just come up as soon as you can." 5 minutes later, Sarah sat across from Palmer in his expansive top-floor office. His expression was grave. "The board of directors has some concerns about the childcare project," he said without preamble. Sarah's heart sank. "What kind of concerns?" "Cost, liability, return on investment. The usual short-sighted focus on quarterly numbers." He sounded frustrated. "A few board members are questioning whether this is a wise use of company resources." "But you said—" "I know what I said, and I stand by it. But as CEO, I still answer to the board." Sarah felt a wave of disappointment. After all their work, would the project be canceled? "What can we do?" she asked. "We need to convince them." Palmer leaned forward. "They've requested a presentation at their meeting next week. They want to hear directly from the project manager, that's you, about why this childcare center deserves their support." Sarah swallowed hard. Presenting to the board of directors was far more intimidating than her department presentation had been. What if they're not convinced? "Then we fight harder," Palmer said firmly. "This project is too important to abandon. Not just for Palmer Technologies, but for every company watching to see if we succeed." Sarah nodded, determination replacing her initial fear. "I'll start preparing right away." "Good. And Sarah—" Palmer's voice softened slightly. "Bring Ethan to the presentation." "Ethan? Why?" "Because sometimes seeing is more powerful than hearing. The board needs to be reminded that we're not just talking about a line item in a budget. We're talking about real families, real children, As Sarah walked back to her office, her mind was already organizing what she would say to the board. This wasn't just about keeping her new position or completing a project anymore. It was about creating something that could change lives, not just for her and Ethan, but for everyone who worked at Palmer Technologies and, perhaps someday, beyond. The next week would be the biggest challenge of her professional life. But for the first time, Sarah felt ready for whatever came next. She had found not just a job, but a purpose, and she wasn't going to give up without a fight. Sarah spent the weekend preparing for the board presentation. She spread her materials across the kitchen table while Ethan helped by organizing her notes and asking questions about parts that confused him. If an 8-year-old can't understand it, the board probably won't either, he said wisely, making Sarah smile despite her nervousness. By Sunday night, they had created a presentation that Sarah felt confident about. It covered all the practical aspects, costs, benefits, logistics, but also told a story about what the childcare center would mean for employees and their families. "Do I really have to wear a tie?" Ethan asked that evening as Sarah laid out his clothes for the next day. "Mr. Palmer wants you to look your best for the board," she explained, adjusting the small clip-on tie she'd bought him. "Just like I'm wearing my best suit." "What exactly do I have to do?" "Just be yourself," Sarah said. "Mr. Palmer thinks it's important for the board to meet a real child who would benefit from the center." Monday morning arrived with knots in Sarah's stomach. As she drove to work with Ethan in the back seat, she tried to calm her nerves by reviewing her key points aloud. "Mom?" Ethan interrupted. "You already know all that stuff. You're going to be great." Sarah caught his eye in the rearview mirror and smiled. "When did you get so grown up?" "I'm 8.5, remember?" he said seriously. At Palmer Technologies, they went straight to Sarah's office to drop off their things. Palmer had arranged for the board meeting to start at 10 a.m., giving Sarah time for last-minute preparations. At 9:45, there was a knock on her door. It was Palmer. "Ready?" he asked, looking between Sarah and Ethan. Sarah nodded, gathering her materials. "As ready as we'll ever be." Palmer led them to the boardroom on the top floor, a large, imposing space with floor-to-ceiling windows and a massive table where 10 people were already seated. Sarah recognized a few of them from company events, but most were unfamiliar. "Good morning," Palmer said as they entered. "Allow me to introduce Sarah Miller, our operations manager for employee services, and her son, Ethan." The board members nodded politely, though some looked surprised to see a child in the boardroom. "Ms. Miller is here to brief you on the Child Care Center project," Palmer continued, positioning his wheelchair at the head of the table. "As you know, I've allocated significant resources to this initiative because I believe it represents the future of Palmer Technologies, not just as a tech company, but as a leader in workplace innovation." He nodded to Sarah, signaling for her to begin. Taking a deep breath, Sarah stepped to the front of the room. For the next 20 minutes, she walked the board through her presentation, explaining how the Child Care Center would operate, the costs involved, and the benefits expected. "Studies show that companies with on-site childcare see a 40% reduction in employee absenteeism," she explained. "They also report higher retention rates, especially among women in technical fields, and increased productivity." She showed photos of the construction progress and designs for the finished space. When she got to the section about the educational robots, she could see several board members lean forward with interest. "By incorporating Palmer Technologies' own robotics innovations, we're not just creating a daycare," Sarah said. "We're creating a showcase for our products and a testing ground for new applications in educational technology." Throughout her presentation, Sarah noticed one board member in particular, an older man with steel-gray hair, who seemed skeptical, occasionally shaking his head or whispering to the woman beside him. "Thank you, Ms. Miller," Palmer said when she finished. "Are there questions from the board?" The gray-haired man spoke up immediately. "This all sounds very nice, but the fact remains that this is an extraordinary expense for what is essentially an employee perk. How can we justify this to our shareholders?" Before Sarah could answer, Palmer jumped in. Richard, I believe Ms. Miller has already addressed the ROI question with her data on retention and productivity. Numbers on slides are one thing, Richard countered. Real-world results are another. This seems like a feel-good project without solid business justification. Sarah felt her confidence wavering. She glanced at Ethan, who was sitting quietly in a chair against the wall, watching the exchange with wide eyes. "If I may," she said, finding her voice again, "this isn't just about numbers. It's about people. Real employees who struggle daily with the challenges of balancing work and family." Richard looked unimpressed. Emotional appeals don't change the financial reality. There was an uncomfortable silence. Then, to everyone's surprise, Ethan stood up. "Excuse me," he said, his small voice steady despite the intimidating setting. "Can I say something?" Palmer smiled. "By all means, young man." Ethan walked to stand beside his mother. His tie was slightly crooked, but he stood tall. "My mom is really smart," he began. "She works really hard to take care of me and do a good job here. But sometimes that's tough." He looked directly at Richard. "The day I came here, when the daycare was closed, Mom was so worried. She had to hide me in a supply room because she couldn't miss work, but she also couldn't leave me home alone." Several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "If there was a place for kids here," Ethan continued, "parents wouldn't have to worry so much. They could work better because they'd know their kids are okay. And kids would get to see where their parents work and maybe learn cool stuff about robots and technology and want to be engineers when they grow up." He paused, then added, "I think that's what you'd call a... what was that word, Mom?" "Return on investment," Sarah supplied, her heart swelling with pride. "Yeah, that," Ethan nodded. "Anyway, that's all I wanted to say." The room was silent for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, Richard chuckled. "Well," he said, "that was more convincing than any slide I've seen today." A few other board members laughed, and the tension in the room eased. "Young man," Richard continued, "are you interested in robots yourself?" "Yes, sir," Ethan replied. "I'm building one at home. It's supposed to sort recycling, but I'm having trouble with the sensor calibration." This caught Richard's attention. "Sensor calibration, you say? That's a complex issue even for our engineers." "Mr. Palmer was going to help me with it," Ethan said. "He knows a lot about robots." Sarah glanced at Palmer, who was watching the exchange with an amused expression. Richard turned to Palmer. "James, you didn't mention you were mentoring children in robotics now." "There's a lot I don't mention in our quarterly reports, Richard," Palmer replied, "including how many talented young minds are out there just waiting for the right opportunity to flourish." He gestured to the room. "This company was founded on innovation, finding new solutions to old problems. The Child Care Center is exactly that kind of innovation. It's not just about providing a service, it's about reimagining what a workplace can be." The board discussion continued for another half hour, with questions about specific aspects of the project. Sarah answered each one confidently, building on the momentum created by Ethan's unexpected speech. Finally, the board chairwoman spoke. "I think we've heard enough. Let's put it to a vote." Sarah held her breath as each board member voted. When the final tally was announced, 8 in favor, 2 against, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Congratulations, Ms. Miller," the chairwoman said. "Your project is approved to continue as planned." As they left the boardroom, Palmer looked pleased. "Well done, both of you," he said. "Especially you, Ethan. You've got a future in corporate presentations." Ethan grinned. "Does this mean the robots are definitely going to be in the daycare?" "Absolutely," Palmer confirmed. "In fact, I'd like you to be one of our first testers. Dr. Chen mentioned that your feedback on the prototype was quite helpful." "Cool," Ethan exclaimed. "And Sarah," Palmer added, "I'd like to expand your role. Beyond managing the Child Care Center, I want you to head up a new initiative on workplace innovation, looking at other ways we can support our employees and their families." Sarah was stunned. "That's a big opportunity." "You've earned it," Palmer said simply. Sometimes the best ideas come from people who understand the problems firsthand. The next 2 months flew by in a blur of activity. The childcare center took shape, with colorful, comfortable spaces designed for different age groups. The educational robots underwent final testing and refinements. Staff were hired and trained. And through it all, Sarah and Ethan were at the center of the excitement. On the day before the grand opening, Sarah took Ethan for a final walkthrough of the completed facility. "What do you think?" she asked as they explored the bright, cheerful rooms filled with books, toys, and learning stations. "It's amazing," Ethan said, watching as Dr. Chen made some final adjustments to one of the robots. "And to think it all happened because the daycare flooded that day. Sometimes the worst days turn into the best opportunities," Sarah reflected. As they walked through the outdoor playground area, Sarah spotted Palmer approaching with someone she didn't recognize, an older woman with a cane. "Sarah, Ethan," Palmer called. "There's someone I'd like you to meet. This is my mother, Eleanor Palmer." Sarah extended her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Palmer. Please call me Eleanor," the older woman said warmly. "James has told me so much about both of you and this wonderful project. I insisted on seeing it before the official opening. Mom was the one who suggested I consider using the robotics division for educational applications," Palmer explained. "She was a teacher for 40 years before retiring. The idea of robots helping children learn, while still having human teachers for guidance and emotional support, is exactly the kind of balanced approach education needs," Eleanor said. "And to think it all started because of this young man's curiosity." She smiled at Ethan. "Would you like to see the robots in action?" Ethan asked eagerly. "Dr. Chen is testing them now." "I'd love that," Eleanor replied. As Ethan led Eleanor toward the technology room, Palmer turned to Sarah. "You've done remarkable work here," he said. "This is far beyond what I initially envisioned." "It's been a team effort," Sarah replied. "And having Ethan involved in the process has made a huge difference. He sees things from a perspective we adults often miss." Palmer nodded. "Children have a way of cutting through complications to find the heart of what matters." They watched as Ethan demonstrated one of the robots for Eleanor, his face animated with excitement. "You know," Palmer said thoughtfully, "my condition has taught me that there are many different ways to move through the world. Some of us use wheelchairs. Some use technology to overcome challenges, but all of us need connection to our work, to our purpose, to other people." He gestured to the child care center around them. "This place isn't just about watching children while their parents work. It's about creating connections between parents and children, between our company and families, between technology and education." Sarah nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. It's about seeing possibilities instead of problems. The next morning, Sarah stood by the entrance as employees and their children arrived for the child care center's first official day. Each family was greeted by staff, given a tour, and introduced to the robots that would be part of their children's daily activities. The excitement was palpable. Children ran from room to room exploring the new spaces. Parents looked relieved and grateful, many stopping to thank Sarah personally. Ethan, who had insisted on being there for the opening before going to school, stood beside her, proudly wearing a small badge that read, "Junior Consultant." "We did it, Mom," he said, beaming as he watched the center come to life. Sarah put her arm around his shoulders. "Yes, we did." Across the room, she caught Palmer's eye as he spoke with a group of parents. He nodded to her, a silent acknowledgement of what they had accomplished together. 3 months ago, Sarah had been hiding her son in a supply closet, terrified of losing her job. Now she was leading a groundbreaking initiative at one of the country's most innovative companies, with a future brighter than she had ever imagined. Life could change in an instant, sometimes for the worse, but sometimes unexpectedly for the better. All it took was the courage to face challenges head-on and the vision to see opportunities where others saw only obstacles. As Sarah watched the children playing, the parents smiling, and the robots assisting with gentle guidance, she felt a sense of completion. They had created something meaningful. Not just a childcare center, but a new way of thinking about work and family, technology and humanity, problems and solutions. It had all come full circle, from a crisis to a creation, and in that circle, Sarah, Ethan, and Palmer had each found something they needed. Sarah, a path forward, Ethan, a place to grow, and Palmer, a reminder of what truly mattered. Together, they had built something that would touch countless lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. And that, Sarah thought as she greeted another family at the door, was the greatest success of all.